Hey everybody, this is Trevor, and you're watching my channel, Social Dilemma. And the social dilemma that's been going on here in my part of the neck of the woods, we've had school closures. The union CUPE, CUPE, that represents workers that are in a support staff role, not your actual teachers standing in front of the blackboard, but everyone else that keeps the schools open and support staff. They went on strike just this past Friday, and it's now Tuesday morning, and it looks like the schools here in Ontario, Canada, they're starting to open. There are certain parts that aren't open yet, but they did go on strike. For your obvious union kind of, more pay, and that's usually it's always that it's always that more pay. Now, I'm not going to be here to bash unions today because I feel that I do have a good take on unions. I worked in 7 hospitals here in Canada and for 20 years, 1996 to 2016, and in those years I belonged to a union whether I wanted to or not. And you made me see my take on unions. I always felt that unions should be like an in-house union, wherever you work. Like I worked in a whatever particular hospital, we should have had an in-house union. And the problem is, when I worked in hospitals, when I first started working in hospitals, the union I belonged to was SEIU, and then we voted them out, and the CAW was brought in. Now, if you're from Canada, you'll know the Canadian Auto Workers. It's a huge union. It's kind of parallels the American UAW, American Auto Workers Union. So the particular hospital I had was CAW. And the problem I always had with that was the unions, like just talk about unions here. They were originally formed to fight against the big conglomerates, the corporations. They wanted to help the working man. But over the years, now this is, I can remember talking about this with people 20 years ago, turn of the century, where unions are now the big conglomerates and corporations that they were fighting against. You look at like the CUPE, CUPE union. That's a very huge union. It just had 55,000 support staff workers in Ontario go on strike. That's a huge union. So they have a massive amount of power. But where they didn't have power is that they're dealing with the government. And the government here in Ontario ruled, the illegal strike, and you can't just walk out like that, as where, forcing them back to work. Now, if someone, like in a private sector, the union workers go on strike, I mean, the owner can't force them back. They have to, hopefully they get back to the bargaining table and they hammer something out. But it should be everyone's right to go on strike. To me, it's akin to protesting. If you feel that your rights are being trampled, you should have the right to go on strike. But again, if you're a government worker and belong to a union, there's going on strike is like the government will shut that down. As again, private owners will perhaps let them slide a bit longer and go on strike, but eventually they do have to sit down, and they can't force people back to work. So, just my experience with unions, I really look at them and I go, man, they have become the very thing that they were fighting against. The huge conglomerates, the corporations. And again, this is why I'm a fan of smaller in-house unions, wherever you're working at, a warehouse, hospitals, wherever. It should be an in-house union. So I'm not opposed to unions, but I am opposed to these giant corporation unions, and that's all they become. In fact, when I worked for my 20 years in 7 different hospitals here in Canada, a lot of the people that were in the unions there that were supposed to be representing the people in the hospitals, I would say a majority of them wanted to get out of the hospitals and join the CAW. It's just, I don't know. It just seemed kind of weird to me that that's what people wanted to do. But again, I guess there's safety in being in a giant corporation. that's just my take on it. So I don't understand where unions today. They're just giant conglomerates and corporations. And that being said, so I hope everyone has a good take on there. I'm not opposed to unions, okay, but I am opposed to the giant unions that are now corporations. So that being said, now that these unions are giant corporations, you think they would have a lot of power and want to support the people. And where this gets me kind of angry, I suppose, is that so I look at the CUPE situation that's happened. They went on strike, and it's for money. Unions will say, no, no, it's not for money, but it really is. They want more money, and we are in a time of recession. There is no more money, so everybody's got to live within their means, and that'd be nice if government lived within their means, but obviously not. You can just tell how they live. But where were these unions when, in the past 2.5 years, when people were getting fired, people were getting let go? You couldn't apply for a job unless you wore a mask or got the arm jab. Okay, where were the unions for these people that were being let go? Okay, this is what's really upset me about unions in the COVID age, is that they were just tumbleweeds. They didn't say anything or do anything to help their workers. Okay, I know of people who worked in the healthcare system here in Canada, and they most of them were like, okay, I guess if I have to put, the face mask on, okay. Some of them were like, I'll take the weekly COVID tests. And then it came down to the point where, like, that's, you have to get the COVID vaccination now. And they were like, no, you know what? I draw the line in the sand. Because you got to draw a line in the sand. Everybody has to draw a line in the sand at some point. And people did. And they would go to their unions and say, hey, this is, I don't want to take this medical procedure. What can you do for me? And unions just sat there looking around. They were just nowhere to be seen. And people were fired from their jobs. Not just in Canada. I mean, this happened in the United States as well, too. Where were the unions? Nowhere to be found. So this is why I'm angry, because I watched videos, news clips of the CUPE union. And I'm not just picking on CUPE. This could be any union. This could be any union across the face of this earth. But I'm using them as an example because the union leaders were coming out and we're fighting for our members, and you can't force us back to work, and blah 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 blah. There was none of these union leaders coming out in the past at least 2 years going, we're going to fight for everyone's right. Forced medical procedures are wrong and illegal. Whichever term you want to use, they're definitely wrong and illegal. It should have been voluntary. But none of the union leaders of any of the major unions that I can think of here in Canada and the United States and across the world stood up for anyone. But now that, COVID's kind of, is it being buried under the carpet, I guess? I don't know. What's next here? The war in Russia, Ukraine, world's war coming around? So, I don't know. Is COVID buried? Who knows? But it would seem to me, it is obvious that unions were non-existent for all their members. And they did not stand up. Not one, I don't remember any news clips of any major unions coming out and saying, hey, we support our workers' rights. But now, now I guess it's COVID, it's kind of being buried under the carpet. Now that their members need more money, because everybody needs more money. And I'm not fooling about that. I'm not making fun of them. Yes, they do. They need more money. We all need more money. But, we're in a recession time right now. So forcing the private sector to pay people who work in the government sector more money, it is a difficult pill to swallow, and try to help everybody out, but I don't know if now is the best time to be going on strike and whatnot, but they did, and it come down to money. So am I angry at them? No, because they have the right to go on strike. Um, I don't think you should have to force them back to work. But again, where were these union leaders when COVID was here and workers are getting fired? So that's my question of the day for unions. Uh, and pointing out some obvious factors that unions today are just giant corporations. They're not, and they work so integrally with corporations and government today that you just they're they become a parody of themselves. Okay, um, what more? I mean, yeah, basically, where were unions in the past few years when workers were getting fired? Nowhere. And I can tell you right now, people tell me, oh, my union reps, my union, they're not doing anything for me. And they were let go. So, something to look at, people. If you're a union rep, you work for one of these big unions, think about it. You are part of a huge conglomerate. You work for a huge corporation, whether it's CUPE, CAW, Teamsters, UAW, whatever. Name one of the big unions that are around the world. I'm sure there are big unions in the UK and Europe and everywhere else. Think about it. You are working for the very organizations you are supposed to be fighting against. Okay, so perhaps, now they won't do it anymore, but they wouldn't even consider it, having an in-house union, which is what I promote, being voluntarily run. If you had an organization with 1,000 people that work there, maybe a few people would volunteer their time to run an in-house union. And you could voluntarily donate to them. Say, hey, Jack and Diane over there, they're volunteering a few hours a week to help run the in-house union. Maybe everybody, you just voluntarily donate. Hey, maybe I'll give them each, 1,000 people, give them $5 each a month or something like that. Voluntarily, you can give them $50. You don't have to give them anything because that's what it's supposed to be, a voluntary organization. But unions today are nothing but huge conglomerates, corporations, and they're not there for their members. And they certainly weren't there for their members during COVID. And yeah, they weren't there. So I don't know what more to add to this other than, yeah, I mean, I come from a perspective of someone who had 20 years of working in unions and didn't help me, I don't think any. I had talked about promoting an in-house union and everyone didn't seem to like that idea, but there we go. Unions are big conglomerates, they're corporations, they're parodies of themselves today. And where were you? Where were you, unions? I'm directing this question to you. Where were you when your members were getting fired because they didn't want to take a certain medical procedure? Okay? That's where I'm going to end this today. Everybody, stay free, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.